Okay, let's unpack this. If you grew up in the West, or really in any culture that's heavily influenced by the major monotheistic religions, you probably have this deep-seated assumption about how religion works at its core.
Yeah, it's practically baked right into our cultural DNA, isn't it?
Exactly. The basic formula is just assumed.
Yeah.
There's a universe. It is incredibly complex. Therefore, there must be a creator who made it.
Right, a supreme being, an almighty architect sitting outside of time and space, just pulling all the strings.
Right. But what happens when you look at one of the world's largest, oldest, and most profound spiritual traditions, I mean, Buddhism, and you realize that it built this entire massive system of ethics and cosmology by explicitly rejecting that very idea?
It's wild. It completely flips the script on what we assume a spiritual tradition even is. And what's fascinating here is that the Buddha didn't just, casually ignore the idea of a creator god.
He went right after it.
He really did. When you look at the historical texts, he actively diagnosed the belief in a supreme creator as a profound psychological delusion. He looked up at the heavens, acknowledged the existence of these seemingly divine, immensely powerful beings, and essentially concluded that, well, while they might live a very long time and possess great power, they absolutely did not make this universe.
They're just as trapped in the system as we are.
Exactly, trapped within its overarching laws, just like the rest of us.
Which brings us to the core of what we are exploring today. Welcome to this deep dive. We have a pretty massive stack of sources on the table for you today.
We do. We're looking at some incredible ancient texts from the Pali Canon.
Specifically the Brahmajāla Sutta and the Sutta. And we're also examining these intense philosophical treatises by medieval Buddhist scholars, guys like Vasubandhu and Nagarjuna.
Right, the thinkers who took these early ideas and built really rigorous logical frameworks around them. Plus, we're pulling from modern academic papers that analyze Buddhist cosmology and its rather surprising parallels with modern science.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how and why the Buddha rejected the concept of a supreme creator. We want to look at what actually replaces that concept in Buddhist thought.
And most importantly, we want to show you how this massive philosophical shift drastically moves the ultimate power over reality directly into your own hands.
Because a universe without a divine architect isn't just some abstract metaphysical debate for scholars sitting in a tower. It completely changes your own psychological landscape. It changes how you interact with the world every single day.
It really changes everything.
So to really grasp this, I think we need to start with the cosmos itself. When we say the Buddha rejected a creator, how is he actually defining the universe in these ancient texts? Because it certainly isn't a straight line from Genesis to Revelation.
Oh, not at all. In Buddhist cosmology, the universe is fundamentally cyclical. It's beginningless and endless. There's no concept of a singular first creation event.
No Big Bang that starts the clock.
Well, not a single one, right? Instead, the cosmos constantly expands, stabilizes, contracts, and then remains in a state of dissolution over these immense, practically unfathomable epochs of time.
And what's particularly interesting in our sources is that Thai Buddhist scholars, along with modern cosmologists, have noted some striking similarities here.
Yeah, the parallels between this ancient text-based view and modern scientific theories are amazing. The cycles of cosmic expansion and contraction, the idea that world systems function a lot like solar systems or galaxies.
It's a remarkably dynamic view of reality. The concept of a beginningless cycle mirroring the birth and extinction of stars.
Exactly. So we're looking at a universe of constant flux, completely governed by natural laws rather than some divine blueprint.
But that raises an obvious question for me. If there is no creator in this constantly churning universe, where did the idea of an almighty God come from in the first place?
That is the big question. And the Buddha actually provides an origin story for the concept of God. It's found in the Brahmajāla Sutta.
Which translates to the net of views, right?
Yes. And it is a brilliant piece of psychological diagnosis wrapped up in a cosmological myth. The Sutta describes what happens after one of those massive destruction phases of the universe.
The contraction phase.
Right. Everything has contracted and dissolved. Eventually, over countless eons, a new world system begins to form and expand again. The text explains that the first being to re-emerge into the higher, more refined realms of this new universe, purely due to their own immense past good karma, is a being called Maha Brahma.
And Brahma is the traditional Indian term often used for the supreme creator deity.
Exactly. So Maha Brahma basically wakes up in this newly formed, empty heavenly palace. He's completely alone, and according to the text, after a very long time of just sitting there by himself, he starts to feel forlorn and lonely.
He wants company.
Right. He thinks to himself, I wish there were other beings here with me. May other beings come here. And just at that very moment, because their own independent karma has ripened, other beings naturally arise and appear in that realm with him.
Okay, this is the crucial pivot in the narrative. Maha Brahma looks at his preceding wish, and then he looks at these new beings who have just materialized.
And he makes a monumental error in logic.
He assumes causation, where there is only correlation.
Precisely. He declares, I am the maker, the creator, the almighty, the father of all beings, and the newly born beings who just woke up, look around, see him already sitting there in his glory, and assume that because he was there first, his claim must be true.
So he basically wakes up in an empty mansion, wishes for roommates, and when they finally show up, he assumes he summoned them into existence. That is a massive case of mistaken identity.
It really is. The Buddha is categorizing the concept of a creator god not as a theological truth that needs to be worshipped, but as a profound psychological delusion.
It's rooted in cosmic amnesia.
Exactly. The creator isn't an almighty being existing outside the system. He's just the first individual to show up to the party who mistakenly thinks he built the house.
He's a very long-legged, very powerful, but ultimately unenlightened being. He is still trapped in the cycle of rebirth, just like us.
Yes. But think about the context here. If the Buddha laid this groundwork, how did he handle the deeply entrenched religious culture around him? Because people actively worshipped these figures.
Oh, the sources show that he loved to playfully dismantle these deities' egos. There's this fantastic story in the Kevada Sutta. A monk wants to know the answer to a deep fundamental question about where the physical elements ultimately cease.
Right, so the monk uses his meditative powers to travel up through the successive heavens, asking all the gods this question.
And none of the lesser gods know the answer. So they keep passing him up the chain of command until he finally reaches the highest heaven, to Maha Brahma himself.
The CEO of the universe.
Exactly. The monk asks Maha Brahma the question. And according to the sutta, Brahma puffs up his chest and gives this booming introduction. I am Brahma, the great Brahma, the conqueror, the unconquered, the all-seeing, the all-powerful.
But he completely dodges the actual question.
He totally dodges it. The monk is not easily intimidated, so he asks again. Brahma just repeats his majestic resume. This happens a third time. Finally, Brahma physically grabs the monk by the arm, pulls him aside so the other gods can't hear, and whispers something to him.
He says, look, these other gods think I know everything. But honestly, I have absolutely no idea. You need to go back down to earth and ask the Buddha.
It is a profound humbling of the divine. And you see this repeatedly in the texts.
You really do. In another instance, Maha Brahma is boasting about the eternal, unsurpassed splendor of his heavenly realm. The Buddha and a few of his enlightened disciples simply visit the realm, sit down, and naturally emit a radiant light that completely outshines Brahma's own glory.
Just totally flexes on him.
Right. It forces the deity to admit that his power is limited, his realm is impermanent, and he is not the ultimate source of light or truth.
So if the Buddha didn't buy the creator narrative, how did he address the obvious follow-up question? I mean, why push back so incredibly hard against the idea that a single Lord created everything? It seems like there was a deeper, more urgent reason than just correcting a cosmological timeline.
There was. It came down to a fundamental ethical and moral crisis. The Buddha recognized that if you believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing creator, you eventually run headfirst into the problem of evil.
The ultimate theological stumbling block.
Exactly. There's a deeply emotional quote from the ancient Puradatta Jataka that captures this historical frustration perfectly. Let me read it. It says, if his wide power no limit can restrain, why are all his creatures condemned to pain? Why does he not give happiness to all? Why do fraud, lies, and ignorance prevail? I count you Brahma, one among the unjust, who made a world in which to shelter wrong.
Wow. That is a devastating critique of divine providence. It essentially asks, if God is holding all the cards, why is the game so rigged with suffering?
And in the Devadaha Sutta, the Buddha takes this argument to its logical endpoint. He states that if an all-powerful God created a world filled with such racking, piercing pain, then he must inherently be an evil God.
Which is a heavy conclusion.
It is, but the Buddha's ultimate concern here was human agency. If a God is responsible for everything, if every pleasure, pain, action, and thought is just the will of the Almighty, then human beings have absolutely no moral responsibility.
That turns the concept of divine will into a massive theological loophole.
Exactly. The Buddha argued that this theistic view is dangerously fatalistic. It gives people an excuse to commit atrocities, to become murderers, thieves, or liars, and just shrug their shoulders, blaming it on the divine script.
If God writes the play and forces you to read the lines, you cannot be blamed for playing the villain.
Precisely. Which brings us directly to why this matters so much for you listening to this deep dive right now.
Right. By entirely removing a creator God from the equation, Buddhism shifts you to a strictly internal locus of control. Your salvation, your happiness, your relief from suffering, none of it is dependent on pleasing a deity.
You don't have to wait around for divine grace or worry about cosmic retribution.
It rests entirely on your own moral discipline, your own insight, and your actions. You hold the keys.
It is deeply empowering, but it requires carrying the full weight of responsibility for your own mind, which naturally leads us to the mechanics of this universe. Because if there is no creator pulling the strings, how does the universe actually function? What holds reality together if not divine will?
Because things clearly still happen. Gravity works, seeds grow into trees, we are born, and we experience suffering. What is the engine behind all of this?
The engine is a concept known as dependent origination, or paikasamuppada in the ancient language. This is the ultimate replacement for God in Buddhist philosophy. It is the impersonal, uncreated cosmic law of cause and effect.
Let's walk through that, because while the term sounds complex, the text defines the core formula quite simply. It goes, when this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. When this isn't, that isn't. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that.
That simple formula describes a vast, infinite web of interconnected causes and conditions. There is no central intelligence deciding who suffers and who prospers. Every phenomenon, whether it's a thought, a physical object, or a historical event, arises strictly because previous phenomena provided the exact conditions necessary for it to arise.
And when we look at the sources, this isn't just a physics equation. The cycle of dependent origination describes how our lived reality is actively generated. The texts argue that the cycle of suffering is driven by two very human qualities: ignorance, or avijja, and craving, or tancha.
Which presents the grand irony at the heart of Buddhist philosophy. Humanity spends its time looking up at the sky, trying to find the architect of its reality and the creator of its suffering.
But the architect isn't a divine being in the clouds.
No, the creator is your own ignorant mind, constantly clinging, grasping, and craving for things to be permanent in a universe that is fundamentally impermanent.
What is truly fascinating about this concept is the historical context behind it. The Buddha wasn't just developing this idea in a vacuum. He was actively responding to the established religions of his day.
The academic analysis on this point is brilliant. Scholar Joanna Jervitz has shown through her research that the Buddha's formulation of dependent origination was a deliberate, sophisticated parody of the Hindu Vedic creation myths.
It was a direct counterargument.
Yes. The established view of the time, found in texts like the famous Hymn of Creation, described the universe springing from a divine universal cosmic consciousness, a supreme, self-aware entity that wakes up, desires to create, and divides itself into the multifaceted world.
So the Buddha looked at that established narrative, where a supreme self wakes up and lovingly generates reality, and he completely subverted it.
He took their exact vocabulary and rearranged the sequence. He used their own terminology to prove that consciousness and reality do not emanate from a pure divine self. Instead, they arise from a blind, conditioned chain of ignorant events.
He was demonstrating that the very process they worshipped as divine creation was actually the mechanical trap of suffering. It was a philosophical takedown of the highest order.
It really was. But if the Buddha laid down this intricate philosophical takedown, did later Buddhist thinkers just accept it as dogma, or did they have to continually defend it?
Oh, they defended it vigorously. When we move forward in the sources to medieval India, we find incredibly intense philosophical battles. You have Buddhist heavyweights stepping into the ring against Hindu theologians to systematically dismantle the concept of a supreme creator through pure logic.
These debates were famously rigorous. Buddhist philosophers like Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu weren't merely stating a preference for atheism. They were using advanced logical frameworks to demonstrate that the very concept of an eternal creator is structurally incoherent.
Let's talk about Nagarjuna. He is widely considered one of the most brilliant logicians in history, and he laid out some devastating logical traps. He pointed out the paradox of perfection and desire. He argued that if God is truly self-existent, meaning he's perfect, complete, and needs absolutely nothing, then why did he create the world in the first place?
It highlights a fatal flaw in theistic logic. If God is perfect, he cannot experience desire, because desire implies a lack of something.
Right, you only want what you don't have.
Exactly. So if he desires to create the universe, he is lacking something, and therefore he is not perfect. Did he create out of boredom? Was it a game? Nagarjuna forces the opponent to admit that an absolutely perfect being has no logical motivation to initiate a creation event.
And then we have Vasubandhu, who took a different route. He focused specifically on the mechanics of causality. Let's unpack Vasubandhu's logic, because he tries to prove that an eternal God fundamentally cannot interact with a changing universe.
Vasubandhu's argument centers on the nature of a cause and its effect. Think of it like pushing a domino. The act of pushing the cause happens in a specific moment, and the domino falls as the effect.
Okay.
Vasubandhu argued that if you have a creator God who is changeless, eternal, and frozen outside of time, then that God is a single, unchanging cause. If the cause never changes, the effect must be instantaneous and constant.
So if an eternal God decided to create the universe, the entire universe, with all its history and future, should have popped into existence all at once in a single frozen state.
Exactly. But we look around and we see that reality does not work that way. Things arise in succession, over time. A seed slowly becomes a sprout, then eventually a tree.
The effects are staggered.
Yes. Because the effects in the world are constantly changing and happening in sequences, Vasubandhu argues that the underlying cause itself must also be changing. The push on the domino has to happen at a specific time.
Therefore, an eternal, unchanging creator cannot possibly be the cause of a changing, impermanent world.
Right. The moment an eternal God acts to create something new, that God experiences change, and change instantly destroys their eternal, unchanging nature.
That is incredibly tight logic.
Yeah.
An eternal cause cannot produce a sequential, temporal effect. But here is where we need to play devil's advocate, and I want to push back on this quite a bit.
Let's hear it.
Because if you travel to a Buddhist country today, or visit a Mahayana temple, you're going to see millions of people burning incense, bowing, and praying to massive, beautiful statues of celestial beings.
Ah, yes. It is the glaring elephant in the room when discussing Buddhist philosophy.
It really is.
Yeah.
If Buddhism is so strictly non-theistic, if they spent centuries intellectually dismantling the idea of a creator with domino analogies and logical traps, why do so many Buddhists pray to figures like Amitabha Buddha? They look exactly like gods, they seem to answer prayers, and they preside over glorious heavenly realms called Pure Lands.
It's a fair point.
If Amitabha didn't create the universe, how does he have the power to just create a pure land out of thin air? Doesn't this completely violate the non-creator rule?
It certainly looks like a massive contradiction on the surface, but the Buddhological framework underneath it is very precise. As Buddhism evolved, especially in the Mahayana traditions, these exalted figures emerged as objects of deep devotion. However, the tradition strictly maintains that they are not primal creators.
So what are they?
Amitabha Buddha is an enlightened being who achieved his incredibly exalted status not by divine birthright, but through eons and eons of effort, moral discipline, and accumulated karmic merit across countless lifetimes.
So he is a product of the system, not the author of it. But what about the Pure Land itself? The sources describe it as a perfect environment created for beings to easily achieve enlightenment. How is generating a world not an act of divine creation?
The key difference is that a Pure Land is a localized co-creation, not the primal creation of the universe from nothing. Think of it less like a God speaking reality into existence and more like an incredibly wealthy philanthropist building a specialized university campus.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Amitabha used his immense accumulated karmic merit to shape a specific, localized environment within the existing matrix of reality. He operates completely within the laws of karma and dependent origination. He is a helper, a guide, and a savior figure within the universe, but he did not spin the underlying fabric of the universe itself into existence.
That distinction makes a lot of sense. He is manipulating the existing laws of nature through immense merit, rather than authoring the laws of nature.
Exactly.
But let's look at the Vajrayana tradition in Tibet, because they have this concept of Samantabhadra, who is often called the Adi Buddha, or the primordial Buddha.
Yeah.
When you read the source descriptions, it sounds suspiciously like a monotheistic god. He's described as the source of all things, the ultimate ground of being from which all reality emanates.
That is a very common and very profound Western misinterpretation of Tibetan texts. To clear this up, our sources quote the 14th Dalai Lama and various Dzogchen masters who address this exact confusion.
What do they say?
They are highly explicit. The Adi Buddha is not a person. It is not an autonomous creator entity with a mind that decides to judge people or intervene in history.
So if it's not a conscious creator being, what is it actually representing when the texts say everything arises from it?
It is a profound metaphor. The Adi Buddha represents what the texts call the ultimate clear light, or the pure, unconditioned, fundamental state of the individual's own mind.
Your own mind.
Yes. In this specific philosophical view, when the texts say all things arise from the primordial Buddha, they mean that your entire experience of reality, the way the world appears to you, arises from the nature of your own consciousness.
It is a symbol for the pure, awakened potential that already exists inside you.
Exactly. It is not a king sitting on a throne in the sky. It is the fundamental nature of awareness itself.
It takes the ultimate divine power, the source of reality, and places it right behind your own eyes. So looking at the entire scope of our deep dive today, we have covered some massive territory. We started with Maha Brahma, a lonely deity sitting in an empty heaven, mistakenly claiming to be the almighty God because he didn't understand how karma populated his realm.
And we explored how the Buddha diagnosed that belief as a delusion rooted in cosmic amnesia. We examined the deep ethical necessity of that rejection, how removing a sovereign God preserves human agency, moral responsibility, and prevents a fatalistic approach to suffering.
We walked through the incredible philosophical architecture of dependent origination, highlighting how the Buddha parodied ancient creation myths to show that our own ignorance and craving drive the cosmos.
We also explored how medieval monks like Vasubandhu and Nagarjuna built impenetrable logical defenses to protect this view.
And we finally addressed the nuances of later Buddhist devotion, seeing how even the most godlike figures, or the concept of a primordial Buddha, are ultimately reflections of an enlightened state that operates within natural laws or serves as a metaphor for your own mind.
Which really raises an important question to synthesize all of this. Did Buddhism simply strip the magic and wonder out of the universe by getting rid of a creator god?
It's a fair question.
The sources suggest the exact opposite. Buddhism demythologized the universe only to completely remythologize it around human potential. The absence of a creator god doesn't mean the universe is a cold, empty, meaningless void. It means reality is not a finished product given to you by divine fiat.
It's a fluid, open-ended process that you are intimately co-creating every single second through your intentions, your ethical actions, and your awareness. It is undeniably intimidating to hold that much responsibility, but it's also the ultimate freedom. You aren't a subject in a kingdom waiting for a monarch's decree. You are an active, essential participant in the unfolding of reality. Which leaves us with a final lingering idea for you to mull over today as you step back into your own world. We established that the ultimate creator of your specific world, your experienced reality, and your suffering isn't an almighty deity in the clouds. It is simply your own mind's deeply ingrained habit of craving and clinging to things that change. So if your mind built the architecture of your current frustration or anxiety, your mind possesses the exact same power to take it apart. What small piece of your reality, what tiny fraction of your own suffering, can you consciously choose to uncreate today?